When I learned that my boyfriend, who had been paralyzed from the waist down, could walk again, I left work early to pick him up. I never anticipated seeing Fus in the hospital stairwell, passionately kissing his female secretary. I could occasionally hear her voice from behind the door saying, "Fus, you're amazing now that your legs are better." In that moment, I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I never imagined that the man who had always treated me with care would now be so captivated by someone else. So, I called my mum and said, "Mum, let's change the match for the Winslow family to Thaddeus' Uncle Allah." She replied, "Sure, we all hope you find someone reliable." I whispered, "Fuss has recovered. He can stand now." On the other end of the line, I heard my mom's confused voice. After all, I had been by Fuss's side for 2 years, and there was no reason for him to get better and leave to marry someone else. But thinking about what had just occurred, I calmly responded, "It feels like everything's back to normal for him, but I've lost all hope inside. I don't want him anymore." After hanging up, I turned away from the two of them, wrapped in their happiness. I left, discarding the congratulatory gift meant for Fus, and walked home in silence. As soon as I reached home and opened the door, I was suddenly swept up in someone's arms and spun around several times. "Sarafina, I can finally stand. Will you marry me?" Fus, 2 years later, had finally gotten out of the wheelchair and was kneeling to propose to me. But I couldn't feel any happiness. Tears filled my eyes as I looked at him. I thought to myself, the love shining in his eyes must be real. But the fact that he had betrayed me today with his secretary was also true. Seeing me cry, Fus stood up nervously and wiped away my tears, looking pained. "Sarafina, why are you crying? Don't cry. Today is the proposal. You should be happy." As he said this, he gently slipped the ring he had prepared onto my finger. I recognized it as something he had spent a lot of money on, custom made with our names engraved on it. At that moment, Fuss's friends came out, holding colorful streamers and party poppers, all gazing at me with envy. "Sarafina, Fuss really cares about you. He proposed right after you got better. Congratulations to Fuss on his successful proposal, wishing you and your future spouse a lifetime of happiness." As these warm wishes were spoken, I noticed a flicker of guilt on Fuss's face. I took a deep breath, gathered my emotions, and smiled to thank everyone. Once they all left, Fuss wrapped his arms around me from behind and softly said, "Sarafina, I'm so happy we're finally getting married." His touch was light, but it felt suffocating. I caught a hint of the disinfectant-scented cologne he wore, and memories flooded back of him and his secretary. Getting close at the hospital today, making me feel nauseous. I quickly pushed him away, telling him I was too tired and wanted to rest. Later that night, I heard some noise outside the door, so I got up to check. Since first started using a wheelchair, we had been sleeping in separate rooms. Surprisingly, there was no one else in the room. Before long, I received a friend request from a stranger. The profile picture was of his secretary, and there was a message. "Sarafina, Fus is doing his rehab exercises with me, so you don't need to worry about him." The next picture showed Fus and her lying naked in bed. Seeing the familiar decor of the room made my heart race. I quickly walked out and pressed the elevator button. The entire floor above was bought by Fus to be used as a rehab room. After work, he would train there, but he never allowed me to join him. He said the recovery was too painful. and didn't want me to see it. He was worried it would make me sad. And more importantly, he didn't want me to witness his vulnerability. I hadn't gone there all year, but his secretary shared her daily life on social media. Every time Foos had rehabilitation training, she was right there by his side. And they always appeared so close. At that moment, I stepped off the elevator on the floor above. The empty hallway echoed with the sound of a man and woman kissing. Fuss, I'm pregnant with your baby. I couldn't believe it. As I walked closer to the half-open door, I saw Fuss passionately pressing against the neck of his half-naked secretary. Really? You're so full of energy when you're flirting with her, I thought to myself. Fuss seemed in high spirits, pushing even harder. The crash was loud, and both the person and the door made a ruckus. My hands clenched around my sleeves as tears started to fall uncontrollably. From inside the room, the secretary's voice came out, a bit frustrated. You just love to bully me. Your leg is fine now. When are you going to take me to meet your family? I can keep being your secret lover, but we can't hide the kid forever. Her innocent expression struck Fuss hard. After hesitating for a moment, he finally spoke. Let's wait a bit. We'll talk again after you give birth. Serafina can't have kids anyway, so I'll find a way to tell her we should adopt this baby. But you can't tell Serafina about this, or I swear I won't let you off the hook. I never expected that the car accident a year ago would leave me infertile. And now Fuss was using that twisted excuse to bring an illegitimate child into our home. But in the past, he really had knelt beside my hospital bed, saying over and over that he didn't care if I couldn't have children. His face had been full of love. Tears silently fell as my heart ached a little. Exhausted, I closed my eyes and numbly walked downstairs to go back to sleep. I hardly managed to get any sleep, planning to wake up in the morning feeling groggy when I heard the Fuss enter the bedroom. I was still asleep when he came over and gently lay down beside me. Just as I was about to drift off again, I was abruptly woken up. Feeling a bit irritated, I pushed him away and turned to face the other side. Fuss chuckled softly and said, My dear Serafina, even when you're upset, you still look so beautiful. The truth was, I had already opened my eyes while lying with my back to him. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed numerous red marks on his neck. I turned around, my eyes bloodshot, and Fuss finally realized something was wrong. A hint of panic creeping onto his face. Serafina, what's the matter? Did you sleep badly? I looked down and nodded slightly. I had a nightmare. Fuss sighed in relief and gently comforted me. Don't worry. I'm here with you. What did you dream about that scared you? I looked up at him, my voice shaking slightly. I dreamed that you cheated on me and had a child with another woman. Fuss, would you really do that to me? His expression shifted a little, but he remained serious. He raised his hand and swore, I would never lie to you. If I did, let lightning strike me and bring me a terrible fate. However, after everything that happened the day before and knowing the whole truth, hearing Fuss make that promise made my heart ache. How could he say such a thing? Wasn't he afraid it might actually come true? Fuss chuckled softly, his eyes filled with deep affection as he looked at me. That won't happen, because no one knows better than I do just how much I love you. If you don't believe me, I'd stake my life on it. You may be willing to sacrifice your life, but you can't control your desires. The scent of other women is still on you, yet you speak the sweetest words. I thought to myself. I smiled quietly and chose not to continue the conversation. Foos seemed to relax a bit and then change the subject. This afternoon, Fasol mentioned she'd take us to the temple to pray and make offerings. I'm heading to All Al's engagement party tonight. I've got a surprise for you. I smiled and said, Funny enough, Fuss. I also have a surprise for you tonight. 2 years ago, after Fuss fell into a coma following a car accident, I didn't know much about Buddhism. My body still recovering, I knelt and climbed the 99 stairs to the temple, praying for his safe return. Today, I was back to show my gratitude. I didn't expect to see a soul here during the lottery draw. She looked around, noticing no one was next to her, and with an innocent smile in her eyes, she softly said, Serafina, I'm here to pray for the baby in my belly. What about you? She seemed so certain that she would soon replace me. I turned away, wanting to distance myself from her. But then she suddenly stood up, grabbed my arm and whispered, I'm sorry, Serafina. I forgot you can't have kids. I shouldn't have mentioned it. Watching her speak on her own was a bit amusing. But there was an unsettling feeling in the back of my mind that something was off. Sure enough, while eating vegetarian food, Fuss's mum brought up having children again. Serafina, when do you two plan to have children after you're married? Ever since she found out I couldn't have kids, she hadn't been too fond of me. But because Fuss favored me, she always hinted that I should consider IVF. I didn't expect that after Fuss finally opened up last night, today she'd be so eager to secure a future for Fuss's children. Fuss immediately put down his chopsticks. Mom, I already told you, Serafina and I don't plan on having kids. If you keep pushing us, I won't come home anymore. Fuss's mum wanted to lecture him for being ungrateful, but I jumped in at that moment. All right, fine. Let's have one then. But I'm afraid of the pain from IVF. How about we just adopt? As soon as those words left my mouth, several people looked at me with visible excitement. Fuss's mum nodded eagerly in agreement. I feel the same way. When the time comes, why not all adopt together? Starting early and nurturing a successor sounds great. I said it with such enthusiasm, as if I had just welcomed a grandchild. Fuss listened but didn't say much. He was looking forward to this outcome, but seeing how understanding Serafina was made him uneasy. It felt strange that she was so mature for her age. As they made their way down the mountain, the weather quickly turned for the worse. Fuss's expression grew distant. They hadn't been driving long when suddenly there was a loud crash as their car collided with the one in front. In an instant, the car spun and flipped over. The terrifying memory of that accident 2 years ago came rushing back. The airbag deployed, leaving me feeling dazed and my body trembling uncontrollably. Fuss noticed my fear and quickly leaned in to comfort me. Serafina, are you okay? Don't be scared, I'm here. I choked out a yeah before he even reached me. The secretary in the back seat started crying softly. Fuss, please don't leave me. My stomach hurts so much. What should I do? Fuss quickly rushed to pull Asul out, checking her for injuries. I leaned back, feeling faint from poor circulation. And in my foggy state, I remembered how Fuss had protected me during that car accident before. He turned away, just as he was gently taking care of Asul. At that moment, out of fear, I instinctively called out for the person I trusted, yet reaching out for help brought no response. Serafina, Asul's not feeling well. I'll take her to the hospital. After saying that, I waited obediently for him to return before picking up Asul and walking away. I watched as Fus slowly disappeared into the distance, no longer breaking down or shouting. I struggled to push away my internal fear and calm myself. After a long wait, the traffic police finally helped me out of the car. Once back at the base of the mountain, I gave my statement and took a moment to rest. On my way to the dress shop that evening, I still felt somewhat anxious. When the staff brought out the gown Fus had chosen for the engagement party 2 years ago, a wave of memories flooded back. That's when I realized what was happening. I took the dress and noticed a few wrinkles. When I asked the sales associate, I learned that this gown had been worn by a soul. A feeling of discomfort washed over me. But luckily, I no longer needed it. My phone buzzed with a message from Allah. It said that they had made a special dress just for me and even shipped it by air. I showed the staff the custom order details and waited for them to bring it out. As I set aside the old gown, Fus and Asul walked in. When Fus saw me, he quickly pulled his hand away from Asul and reached for me. Sarafina, I'm glad you're all right. When I went back to find you, I saw you'd already left the mountain. Anyway, why did you throw away the wedding dress we had custom made together? It's old and dirty, and I'd rather wear something new, I replied. Fus seemed like he wanted to say something else, but I had already stepped into the fitting room to change. I told the staff to leave, not wanting any help. Before long, Asul confidently entered, dressed in her underwear. Sarafina, why aren't you wearing the dress from earlier? Did you hear something? She asked. I've already worn it and had a great time with Fus. As she spoke, she suddenly tugged at my robe. The scar from the accident caught everyone off guard. Asul walked over and looked at my scar. Wow, Sarafina. If I were in your shoes, I'd feel embarrassed wearing a formal dress. No wonder Fus always says he loses interest when he sees you undressing. He finds it so disgusting, it makes him want to throw up. By the time Fus left, my feelings for him had faded completely. Now, facing Asul's provocation, I felt entirely calm. She didn't see the anger she expected on my face, and she looked slightly disappointed. Ignoring her, I slipped into the evening gown. The custom fit was perfect. It hid the scars and made my figure look amazing. Just as I stepped out of the fitting room, Asul rushed over, crying, and hugged me tightly. As she was about to bump into me, she purposely tripped herself and fell to the ground. Sarafina, why did you push me? She demanded. I just wanted to tell you not to wear someone else's clothes, I replied. Thaddeus immediately turned his attention to Asul, concern on his face. He shot me an angry look and said, Sarafina, Asul hurt her leg in a car accident today. Why would you push her? Realizing his tone was too harsh, he intended to explain himself. But then he suddenly looked up and noticed the dress I was wearing, which had a distinct mark on it. He recognized it as a custom gift from his uncle for his fiancée. He immediately stepped forward to confront me. Sarafina, this is from my uncle. You have no right to cause a scene. What gives you the right to wear it tonight? Take it off right now. Fus saw that I wasn't reacting and immediately stood up, barking orders at the staff to forcibly remove my dress. In the chaos, I tripped over my skirt and fell, exposing my back. When I turned my head, I saw the man who once showed so much concern when I was hurt, now coldly watching as others pushed me down, completely indifferent to my humiliation. Just then, as people murmured, a tall figure pushed open the door. Allaire walked in, dressed in a tailored suit. his gaze fixed intently on Fus. Thus, who taught you to treat my fiancé like this? The moment Allah entered, he exuded a powerful presence that immediately caught everyone's attention. The staff stopped tugging at my skirt, and Asul was taken aback, shyly gazing at Allah. It had been years since we last met, and I still remembered him as the neighbor boy who never liked to eat. When our eyes met in the crowd, I instinctively tugged at my torn skirt to hide the scar on my waist. He immediately came over to help me up and wrapped his coat around me. "Are you okay, Serafina?" I shook my head, about to say thank you, but before I could, Thaddeus intervened, speaking respectfully. "Allah, I'm really sorry. Serafina didn't mean any harm. She wore the dress you had made for your aunt. When I took it off, it accidentally got torn. I'll replace it for you." Asul chimed in, backing Fus. "Allah, don't blame Serafina. She just really likes other people's things. It's your uncle's welcome party today, so let's not let this ruin his mood." Allah heard this and let out a cold laugh. "Do I even know you? Don't just call me little uncle. You have no right to comment on the dress I designed for my fiancé." Since childhood, Fus had always been afraid of his cold little uncle getting angry. Asul's face turned pale, and Fus quickly stepped in to defend her. "Alan, Asul is my capable assistant. Serafina doesn't quite understand these things yet, so we still need her assistance, right, Serafina?" Fuss wanted me to participate in the discussion, but I had no interest in dealing with that couple, so I remained silent. Then I couldn't help but sneeze and quickly tightened my jacket around myself. Seeing I wasn't speaking, Fuss became anxious and tried to reach for me. Allah's expression immediately changed, and he ordered a group of bodyguards to surround Fus. He wrapped his arms around me as though claiming me, shielding me as we walked away. "Fus, what's going on with you and your secretary? This is disrespectful to your aunt. What happened to the manners and values the Winslow family taught you? Think carefully before you come back for dinner." Fus stared in shock as Allah took me away. It took him a moment to process the situation. Just as he was about to chase after us and ask what was happening, his father called, urging him to return, leaving him with no choice but to let it go. In the car, Allah kindly handed me a new dress. I opened it and immediately understood, since I'm also in fashion design. It was a dress he had personally designed. I asked Allah, somewhat surprised, "What is this?" Allah, for once, seemed a bit shy, his ears turning slightly red. "This is the wedding dress I designed for you. I thought I'd give it to you after the engagement," he said. "Try this one on first. Then I'll design another one for the wedding." I knew Allah had his own brand, and his designs were well known in the international fashion world. I felt a rush of emotion inside. It seemed he really cared about our wedding. I nodded in response and went to change. After getting out of the car for the engagement banquet, Allah kept things low-key. Fus's dad had only invited a few close friends from elite families. When Allah appeared, I heard him announce on stage, "Today is a special occasion for the Winslow family. My brother has finally found his lifelong partner." Just as Fus's dad finished speaking and was preparing to introduce the star of the event, suddenly, a hand shot out from the side and grabbed the microphone. "Hello, everyone. Welcome to my uncle's engagement party. On this joyous day, I have an important announcement to make. I'm getting engaged too. My fiancée is Serafina from the Marlowe family." "Thaddeus, get down here." Before Fus could finish his introduction, his father hurriedly interrupted. He shook his head in frustration, glaring at his troublesome son. What are you doing? Today is your uncle's engagement party. And when did you even get engaged? How come I know nothing about this? Fus remained calm, completely unaffected by his father's irritation. I think this is a great opportunity, Fus said. I'm throwing an engagement party with my uncle. I was actually planning to use today's family dinner to announce that Serafina and I are officially engaged. Before Fus could continue, Allah stepped out of the hotel in his tuxedo. He quickly came over, grabbed my hand tightly, and led me in front of Fus's dad. Big brother, this is my fiancée, Serafina. Allah had mostly lived abroad since he became an adult and hadn't been home often. This time, my mom had been the only one in touch with him about the marriage. Fus's dad knew his son was getting married, but had no idea who the bride was. As for Fus and me, he knew we had once dated. At that moment, Fus's dad started to put the pieces together. He had been through a lot and could handle situations like this. Even when they were complicated, he frowned for a moment, glanced at the people around him, and then looked at me, asking calmly, Serafina, who are you getting engaged to today? Some guests at the party had already recognized me, and whispers spread. Isn't that Fus and Serafina? They were always so close. 2 years ago, Fus had been injured in a car accident while trying to save me, which left him disabled in both legs. For the past 2 years, I had never left his side. How could there be a situation where an uncle and nephew were competing for the same fiancée? Who is the right person? One guest wondered. I think Arla and Serafina make a perfect match, but there's still a woman next to Fus. Just as I was lost in thought, Fus suddenly pulled me over with force. Serafina, please don't be mad, okay? Everyone knows how much we love each other. I might have ignored you for a bit today, but that doesn't mean you can joke like this. Hurry up and apologize to your uncle and my dad, and then I'll throw you another engagement party. Hearing that, my expression turned cold. I pulled my hand away, walked over to Allah, took his hand and said firmly, Fus, Dad, Fus and I have broken up. I'm really engaged to Allah. The moment Fus's dad heard this, he instantly understood. He nodded with relief, lifted his glass, and tried to lighten the mood. All right, good. My brother is finally settling down. As your older brother, I wish you both all the best. Next, you're getting your marriage license and planning the wedding. If you need our help, just let us know. But then, Fus stood up, nearly spilling his drink. Absolutely not. I don't agree to the breakup. Fus's dad was startled. What's gotten into you today, kid? He shook his head in disbelief. She made it very clear. If you keep talking nonsense, just leave. Fus charged forward, clearly furious. This has to be a misunderstanding. How could you get engaged to my uncle, Serafina? Why are you breaking up with me? You clearly said yes to my proposal. I pushed him away and shot back. Why fuss? What right do you have to ask me that? I laughed coldly. Don't you really know the reason? I saw you with your secretary in the rehab room at the hospital. Fus turned pale as panic overtook him. No, Serafina, let me explain. I can explain everything. I smirked and glanced at the staff next to Allah. Then the big screen switched to footage from the training room, vividly capturing the moments after each training session between Asol and Fus. The room erupted into murmurs. People shot disdainful glances at the two of them. Oh my gosh, just a moment ago, Everyone felt sorry for Fus, thinking he had been wronged. Who would have thought he was not only recovering, but also dating someone else? This guy is an excellent actor. Both of his legs are crippled, yet he's still so unfaithful, even managing to find a mistress. Who would have imagined it? In the banquet hall, the atmosphere was thick with loud accusations, but Fuss seemed oblivious to it all, struggling to break free from the grip of the bodyguards surrounding him. No, I was just charmed by her. She seduced me. Come on, after everything. Especially since I saved you back then, and we've been through so much. I never wanted to break up, he insisted. Serafina, can you trust me one more time? His words seemed sincere, but by this point, I just felt pity for him. He still wanted to deflect the blame, trying to defend himself. I can't trust you anymore. Saving me doesn't give you a free pass from facing the consequences, I replied. What's more important is that I've finally come to speak my mind. You didn't become like this just because you saved me, did you? Honestly, I had once loved him and wanted to believe his words. After that car accident, Foss was hurt far worse than I was. But there was no real reason to claim he became disabled just to save me. Still, he did stay by my side, telling me not to be scared just before he lost consciousness. I always knew those words came from Fus, but back then I never questioned them or sought clarity. I loved him so much and didn't want to leave him. I assumed Fus was just worried that I would reject him because of his disability. What I didn't know was that during every moment when it seemed like he loved me, he was actually loving someone else. After hearing what I said, Allah tightly gripped my hand, looking visibly distressed. Fus's fake smile finally faltered. His face turned pale, and he collapsed onto the floor. Serafina, you knew about this all along, yet you never said a word. Fus clung to a small hope, glancing at me. Serafina, you still love me, right? I just messed up for a moment. To me, a soul is just a tool that can be discarded whenever. My heart belongs only to you, and I love only you. As soon as he said those words, some people even seemed ready to punch Fus. Fus's dad, hearing the commotion, signaled for the bodyguards to drag his son away. Fus's mother, seeing her son beg so desperately, grew upset and charged at me, attempting to hit me. After Arla stopped her, she shot me an angry glare, and her face lost all softness in an instant. What right do you have to talk about my son, you woman who can't have kids? Who else would want you? And now you still dare to say bad things about him. I calmly looked at Fus's mother and responded. How do I lack face? Your son got his mistress pregnant and expects me to adopt their child. Tell me, who's really slandering whom here? Fus's dad witnessed what happened and couldn't hold back his anger any longer. He slapped Fus's mom and yelled, "Is this how you raised our son?" Just get out. Fus quickly intervened to stop his furious mother, nervously explaining to me. Serena, that child was a mistake. I was drunk when Osul had him. I thought adopting him would be better, especially since I worried you'd go through so much with IVF. I've never cared for her. Please, just forgive me this one time, okay? Fus was truly more repulsive than I could have imagined. Before I could say anything, Asul couldn't hold back any longer and rushed over to confront him. But before she could finish her words, Fus shoved her roughly, sending her crashing to the ground. Don't get carried away. I was just joking with you. What right do you have to call me out? Fus glared fiercely at Asul before turning to me with a pleading look. Serafina, let's just get rid of her. Let's go back and get married, okay? I was utterly infuriated by Fuss's shameless words. No, I won't marry you. The person I want to marry is Allah. Just then, Allah walked over and gently wrapped his arm around my waist. Serafina, it's almost time to start the engagement ceremony, he said soothingly. No way. You can't get engaged to him. I absolutely won't allow it. Your uncle has been hiding a lover for over 10 years. He won't truly love you. Serafina, marrying him won't make you happy. I'm the only one who truly loves you, Fus insisted. As soon as he finished speaking, a cold glint flashed in Allah's eyes as he stared at Fus. If it weren't for the family ties, he would have held nothing back. Meanwhile, Fus was seething with anger, feeling that no amount of humiliation would ever satisfy his frustration. He shouted loudly, trying to rush over and separate the two, but in the end, Fus's dad had the bodyguards pull him away. And no matter how much he struggled, it was pointless. Ultimately, both Fus and Asul were removed from the engagement party. Meanwhile, Alair and I proceeded with the engagement ceremony smoothly, with everyone watching us. After the party ended, Alair took me to see the fireworks he had arranged for me. His friends brought over champagne to toast us, showering us with all kinds of good wishes. I'm really sorry, Allah said. The engagement party should have gone smoothly, but so many things went wrong. Allah didn't blame me. He just held me close. Serafina, this isn't your fault. No need to apologize, he reassured me. His understanding made me feel even more uneasy. After a moment of thought, I made up my mind to tell him everything. Fu's mother was right. I had lost the ability to have children in that car accident. I think it's best to tell you about this, I said, preparing to explain. But Allah suddenly cut me off. He held my hand tightly and said, Serafina, I have no regrets. In fact, I feel lucky to be with you. It doesn't matter that there are no kids. I love you. And that's all that matters. Oh, I need to tell you something, he said, pulling out an old photo that had slightly yellowed with age. At first, I didn't quite understand, but when I took it and looked closer, my eyes widened in shock. Was that me in the photo? Allah looked at me gently and nodded softly. I want to be honest with you about something that's been circulating. This idea that I have a white moonlight. Immediately, I understood where this was going. I hesitated for a moment before pointing to myself and asking, Are you saying that I'm the one you've had a crush on for over 10 years? From Allah, I learned about his feelings for me. Feelings he had kept hidden for so many years. Before he went abroad, he stayed at the old Wislow family house for quite a while. Back then, no other kids wanted to play with him because of his personality and physical issues. I was the only one who stuck by Fus and was willing to talk to him. I brought him food every day and told him jokes to make him smile. Allah held my hand tightly, showing his true feelings for the first time. Serafina, I've actually liked you for a long time. I just never found the right moment to tell you, he said. Later, after I returned home, I heard about you again, and it was that you and Fus were together. So every year when I came back, I just dared to watch you from a distance. I never wanted to disturb you. I thought it would continue like that until I got that call from your mum. As Allah spoke, memories I had buried began to resurface. I never realized how sentimental he was. He really knew how to keep his feelings to himself, which made me feel a little sorry for him. I wrapped my arms around Allah and apologized. Sorry to have kept you waiting, my love. He tensed up at first, but then held me even tighter. In that moment, the reason Allah wanted to marry me became clear. It eased my tension and filled me with a sense of security. Allah gently kissed my forehead, and after a long pause, he asked, "Sarafina, would you be willing to move abroad with me?" I turned to him and nodded seriously. "I would," I said. From then on, I began preparing for the job handover, while also making plans to move abroad. After the engagement party, things between Fus and Asul became extremely tense. Fus's mother had always wanted her grandchild back in the family, but Fus and his father disagreed about letting Asul into the Winslow family. Despite that, Fus didn't give up. He came to see me every day without fail. It wasn't until Allah couldn't hold back and started applying pressure that Fus's dad took him back home and kept him there. Soon after, news broke that Fus was planning to marry Asul. The day I was about to leave for abroad with Allah, Fus showed up unexpectedly. He must have caught wind of our plans. While I was in the airport lounge, I had just grabbed my coffee and was heading back when someone suddenly grabbed my hand from behind, spilling coffee everywhere. I turned around in annoyance and saw Fus, his fiery red eyes fixed on me. He was dressed in a sharp, tailored suit, but he looked completely defeated. "Sarafina, are you really planning to go abroad with your uncle and never come back? Can't you stay here instead? I've realized my mistake, and I don't want to get married anymore." Hearing this, it hit me that today was the day he and Asul were supposed to get their marriage license. Last time at the party, they had seemed so awkward together. Fu's dad didn't seem interested in the wedding either, and it looked like he didn't want me and Allah to be there. Fus begged me not to go. When he saw I wasn't budging, he even tried to pull me away forcefully. But just then, I was surrounded by a warm embrace. It was Allah, who had finished the registration and returned looking for me. Not finding me, he had searched everywhere and found Fus losing it. Without saying a word, Allah clenched his fist and aimed it at Fus's face. "Fus, who gave you the right to lay a hand on my wife?" Fus had blood trickling from the corner of his mouth, but he wore a strange smile. His words were sharp. "What are you so afraid of, little uncle? Why are you so eager to take Sarafina out of the country? Are you worried she might rekindle things with me? After all the years I've been with her." Before I could finish my sentence, Allah swung a punch. "You don't know how to speak, huh? Well, I'll take it upon myself to teach you some manners. The Winslow family really has spoiled you. You're something else. As a CEO, seeing the man about to be beaten senseless, I finally shouted for them to stop when I noticed Allah's bruised knuckles. I couldn't help but ask, 'Does it hurt?' I offered, 'I'll help you put on some ointment later.' Fus, holding his swollen face, looked up at me. Grabbing Allah's hand, he seemed utterly broken, laughing and crying at the same time. It was quite a sight. Eventually, as more and more people gathered around, I awkwardly got to my feet. Just then, the bodyguard from the Winslow family and Asul arrived. The woman in the wedding dress spotted me and immediately started yelling, "Sarafina! What kind of potion did you give Fus? You couldn't even let us have our wedding day in peace. Why are you trying to run away from the wedding? What gives you the right? You have everything. It's infuriating. Just go to hell." Suddenly, Asul rushed forward, ready to strike me, but Fus caught her. His expression darkened as he glared at her. "Asul, are you out of your mind? How could you be so reckless in front of Sarafina? You even tried to hurt her. Do you have a death wish or something? Get away from me now." I might have been too lenient with Asul before, and now she thinks she can push me around. Today, she insulted me in public, and that was completely unacceptable. Hearing her say such hurtful things made me realize that I couldn't be soft anymore. I immediately ordered my assistant to grab a bunch of photos. The pictures depicted Foos as a groomsman kissing Asul. There were several close-up shots featuring various wealthy kids. Foos, furious, stared at the images in shock. He had truly believed that Asul at least had feelings for him. That's why, despite knowing about her issues, he chose to marry her for the sake of the child. Little did he know, it was all just a well-planned scam. He was just the easiest target among Asul's many suitors. Fuss, now realizing the betrayal, gripped Asul's collar tightly, his eyes red with anger. How could you lie to me? You said you only loved me, and now you're all over these other guys. He glanced at her stomach and asked, "Tell me that baby isn't theirs, is it?" Asul laughed proudly and responded, "That's just because you're so naive and easy to deceive. Anyway, we're already married, and the child belongs to the Winslow family." As soon as she finished speaking, Foos's expression turned cold. Suddenly, he shoved Asul aside and she fell to the ground, her wedding dress instantly stained with blood. The crowd gasped and screamed in panic, covering their mouths. "Oh my God, call the police! Something terrible has happened." Asul lay on the floor, clutching her stomach, looking pale. She pointed at Foos, her voice filled with anger. "Fuss! How could you be so heartless? You've killed our child with your own hands. You'll be punished." Fuss, however, showed no fear. His expression grew more intense. "I didn't harm a wretch. You're the one who deserves to pay." Just as I was about to turn and leave, Asul grabbed my sleeve tightly, pulling out a bottle containing a strong-smelling liquid. The sulfuric acid splashed on Foos's coat, instantly corroding it. He cried out in pain, and the bodyguards rushed to restrain her. Soon, an ambulance and the police arrived, taking both of them away. It was said that thanks to quick medical treatment, Foos's injuries weren't too severe. The scar on his back was barely noticeable. Unfortunately, Asul's child didn't survive. Both of them were sentenced to 3 years in prison for intentional harm. Asul also faced a divorce lawsuit, and the Winslow family made sure she left with nothing. Despite this, she stubbornly refused to get divorced and chose to remain with the Winslow family. The next update about Foos was that he was struck by lightning on a rainy day. After he fell, he was electrocuted and ultimately died. Alain, worried that I might be upset by hearing such terrible news, planned a long trip around the world to cheer me up. Every day, I happily enjoyed the company of attractive people and delicious food, having a great time.